What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Future Revolution. So I'm happy to be back with you guys because I've been without power thanks to this ice storm in the northeast essential part of the eastern United States, and now I'm back. Thank God for power. Thank you to the people who get out there every day and service lines and things like that for people to recover from, you know, storms and things like that. So let's move on to what I want to talk about. This should be a quick and easy conversation because it's to address Dev Note number 6. Yeah, guys, so they have officially released Dev Note number 6, which is giving us a little insight onto where they're essentially going with the character balancing and the patching. Now, that's all this Dev Note essentially talks about, is the character balancing and patches that they plan on doing in 4 parts. The great part about this Dev Note is that it at least gives us an idea that they're on the right track. I'm going to say that alone. The bad part is that it literally makes me question still, what the hell were they thinking when they went into the game? Let's address some of that right up. So you can read all the frou-frou if you want to on the Dev Note. It is literally on the forums for Netmarble inside their Dev Note patches. So literally right here, you can talk about those. Here was something interesting that they did pull out that I want to pull out. Is that in Marvel Future Revolution, power does not necessarily guarantee strength, since a dynamic play by combining the different hero characteristics, various combat options, and control is required. Their intention was to highlight the unique combat features of Marvel Future Revolution for more dynamic fun coming from maneuvering and controlling your heroes, and instead this acted as a cause of balance issues. So remember when I told you that I think that, you know, the big C19 basically was causing issues for development, because a lot of the game seems like it was developed in a vacuum. Each area basically feels like it was its own insulated place, and there was no thought up to how these characters were going to work within the environment. I'm going to stick by my guns and say that there was no understanding of how these characters were going to work inside these environments in terms of the gameplay mechanics, meaning that there was a lot given into how each of the characters were individually developed, so that way you got the look and the feel of that character, but not so much how those characters fit within a PvP and PvE competition sphere, meaning, like, you know, when we play Invasion, how those characters balance out against other characters when you fight those two characters, whether or not there's a balanced approach to it. The first one pretty much unveils that to me, and it shows that basically what they want to address is the target off skill and specialization. So meaning that they reported problems. They were, you know, they understand that part of the issue is the target off skill issues. Now, what I'm really thinking this is referring to, because I couldn't really tell you for true, is how a character is able to target other characters for skills. And you get to see that with certain characters, and with other characters it's definitely not as pronounced. Like, for instance, with Doctor Strange inside a PvE area, his skills basically single target, but when you have them inside a PvP zone, like for instance using certain skills, feels very unsatisfying, because not only because of his skill animation, but those skills abilities to target. He gets locked into basically using specific skills. Now, I'm not exactly sure how they're balancing that out, but you can see they decide to increase the cooldown for some of those specializations that basically impact the frequency of those skills. So meaning that they want to reduce those skills usages to provide balance, meaning they want to stop that. So it's going to be weird to see that. They specifically cite Star-Lord's apply target off effect on problem solver skills. So you could look at that skill to get a good idea of it. I think that would be of interest, but it, you know, it's going to be one of those things that I want to see how they're going to really specifically target in on it. I understand what they're talking about. I want to see the implementation of what they're talking about before I go into detail on that. But then when we get down here, we can see some other things that lead me to believe these things. Like, like elemental effects. They literally, and this is something that you would notice automatically from any kind of quality assurance testing or any play testing that you had in general, if you were to look at the skills. Basically, elemental effect activations, they deferred for heroes, right? So like Star-Lord and Storm had elemental base plays, and basically you had to build up stacks for those characters to have maximum use ability of those effects. But then you had characters who had like Black Widow and Iron Man who were getting skills out immediately, meaning the effects were activated immediately. So I'm going to bring you guys back to Marvel Future Fight, right? For those players who play Marvel Future Fight, you might understand this more so, because when we look at skills and how they're developed inside there, if you've watched any of my videos where I break down some of the characters inside there, we're basically looking at, in a skill, when do certain effects happen? Meaning, like, do I have any iframes that happen? When do they start? Are they throughout the entirety of the skill? Are they at the beginning, middle, or end of the skill? If I have an ability that's going to provide me HP recovery, does that ability take effect in the beginning of the skill versus taking effect at the end of the skill? Because if they take effect at the end of the skill, that means I have to cancel out, or if that skill gets canceled, then I lose the recovery effect. So a lot of times what you're looking for the maximization of your character's rotation, their skills, is that effects are happening at the beginning of the skill, so that way they have the most impact. So you can see they basically tell you right here with Black Widow and Iron Man, for instance, some of their skills, they immediately happen upon hit. By basically happening immediately upon hit, it stops a character from being able to dodge out of the continuing effect of it, right? Where, like, yeah, so now you're starting to see how this buildup is great in a PvE area where you have standstill targets that aren't moving very much. But inside a PvP area, this is not going to be good, because, you know, hey, Storm has to build up for her skills. It's going to be a very short time for PvP. You know, most likely those matches take anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds. She's not going to be able to activate most of her potential inside there. Same thing with a character like Star-Lord. They're just not going to be able to do it. So they're going to have more ground to cover inside PvE than they are in PvP. That's what it's going to be. So they're going to look at some things like, you know, basically balancing out those stacking abilities for characters like Storm and Star-Lord. So it should be interesting, right? Next up, they address one of the primary issues that players like Doctor Strange are currently having. I can see why Storm and Star-Lord also have this, but Storm especially to a lesser degree. Now, my hope from this is that they basically continue on this path. So potential. They literally address the fact that a lot of characters in the game basically have access to traits that are going to pan out better over the longevity of the character, meaning as you build up. For instance, you can see here, Captain America, Storm, Star-Lord, and Doctor Strange have in their potential status effect accuracy or status effects resistance. Well, these things are not applied. They're very situational. And the more you apply situational abilities, especially when those situation abilities aren't strengths of the character in the first place, like Doctor Strange's best abilities aren't abilities where he provides status effects. The same thing for like Star-Lord, same thing for like Captain America. So having those abilities inside your potential really doesn't help the character. So they're going to be changing those inside the potential, right? So you can see Doctor Strange, his status effect accuracy inside his build is going to be changed to critical damage. So let me show you what I'm talking about with that, just so that way we can, you know, it helps you visualize it. Basically, like if you were to look at Doctor Strange inside here, he has status effect accuracy right here for spell enhancement, and then you can see he also has status effect accuracy for spell enhancement number 2. So essentially these would be changed to critical damage, which would give him another way to boost up. I pointed out to you guys at one point when I got my critical damage up to 230%, it felt like Doctor Strange was doing more of what he was intended to do, meaning that he was hitting characters hard, that when his skills were getting off, he was constantly in that critical rate damage where he was just really excelling. But that means as a player, I have to spend a lot to get to that point. Now, what I would like to see happen is that they apply this same understanding to costumes and specializations, because inside specializations there's also those things that will boost and increase status effect accuracies and things like that, where they become highly situational, that you're like, I don't want those status effects. So for instance, for a character like Doctor Strange, the primary thing that you'll look at, excuse me, activity log is not what I want to see, is his uniforms. His uniforms, unlike a lot of other characters, have buildups of just attack HP, while a lot of other characters get access to defense pierce, they get critical rate, they get critical damage, they get all of these skills. Netmarble, if you watch this video, guys, point it out to them just in case that they missed this inside the patch notes. This is something that we need. It needs to be reflected inside here as well, because we are way behind the power curve with a character like Doctor Strange, basically building him and not having access to those things. Critical rate, like HP is good, but HP doesn't matter in the game because you basically have effects that get past it, especially effects like pierce and things like that. Having a high HP pool doesn't stop me from getting here. Having defense on a particular uniform, is it going to help me? This defensive trait here is worthless. It needs to be changed so that way it's something reflective. Critical rate, critical damage, defense pierce, something like that, so that way we can keep up with in terms of the meta. It's important. So I'm happy to see that, because like I said, it's one of those things that you automatically notice and you go, if they understand it here, hopefully they apply it there. Remember, these notes are not fully fleshed out for them. The next thing that they go into talking about is they said that they're realizing some skills are underused because of their lack of a proper description. Guys, nobody is underusing skills because of their lack of a proper description. Most players, you guys should understand by now, we're smart enough to test out skills, understand the ins and arounds of how they work. They specifically try to address this with a skill like Black Widow, Trained Assassin, Quick Step Strike. Before it says hits enemies, then quickly moves to other nearby enemies to attack and deals such a % of damage, right? After, it's going to be hits enemies, then quickly moves to other nearby enemies to attack and deal N% damage. Untargetable while using this skill. So basically it's telling you that when you use Quick Step Strike, she is in iframe. She does not have a basically what you guys need to be doing for certain skills like this isn't basically adding skill descriptor explanations. You need to put visual explanations to characters. So for instance, inside Marvel Future Fight, when a character hits an iframe, we have a visual indicator that lets us know that that character is in an iframe and that that skill has an iframe and where in the skill it has iframes, right? We want to be able to tell that inside this skill as well. Now, granted, I will point out that a lot of MMORPGs do not have this, right? Like, this is a popular thing from a game like, Dark Souls, for instance. Like, we all knew that when we did our roles, we had a iframe inside the skills, so you would use that role to basically be untargetable during a skill, creating an iframe. I don't know why they're trying to change the wheel, and talking language that's differential from what players already know. We know that basically that means that there's an iframe on the skill. So I don't believe, however, that players are stupid, that that's the reason why they're not using skills. They know, because if they're doing any of their homework to test the skills out, to understand rotations, we understand this. It's going to be interesting because I did see a video by Godslave recently talking about Iron Man and the spin to win combination, and there seems to be some debate about the efficacy of the skill, whether or not it's always up, when it's up, and that could be even a greater discussion about talking about iframes and their usage inside skills and stuff like that. What ignores iframes as well. Like, for instance, that's become a popular thing inside Marvel Future Fight, that characters are being built with ignoring iframes. So that means that they can still target you and attack you while you're inside skills, which would be a great dynamic, because it would add in the ability for other characters to act as balances to certain characters, meaning that okay, Black Widow is in her iframe doing Quick Step Strike, but Doctor Strange's time skill ignores targeting, meaning that it doesn't care that she's in iframe. It's still going to affect her. It'd be a great way to change up skills like that, right? If you put them on powerful skills like that. So basically the main point takeaway from this stuff is to understand that they are at very least on the right track with understanding the things that we need from this. It's about whether or not they're going to see it through. You know what I mean? Like, are they going to see it through to its full conclusion in this next update? For instance, like I pointed out, yes, status effect accuracy and status effect resistance as skills on potentials are weak, but we also need to address uniforms. We also need to address Omega cards and where, you know, certain people have access to certain stats on Omega cards, because you made it at this point where there's a supreme imbalance in building characters, because characters having access to defense pierce on Omega cards while other characters don't, it locks them out from a pool. I can't compete at, you know, the same way. It's going to take me more money to build up one individual character versus another character. It's going to take me more time, more investment in order to see that through, and that's essentially not what we want to have happen. We want characters to you know, rise or be done in the same way at the same level throughout their stages of builds, so that way they're competitive equally across the build. The differential that we want is a skill-based differential, meaning your ability to play and understand how your character plays should be different from another person's skill to play Doctor Strange. Or maybe that there's enough skills inside Doctor Strange's kit that, you know, we can come up with differential builds that become competitive in themselves because we understand the mechanics. But that's not the case, because we're already looking at stats and trying to figure out why we cannot accumulate stats the same way other characters can, especially when there's important stats such as defense pierce, critical rate, critical damage, accuracy, dodge rate. Like, we can't touch freaking Spider-Man inside PvE because he has so much access to dodge rate innately. It's just, those are the things that we have to look at overall. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I got another video coming for you guys about the current events in the game, but I don't want to make this video too long. So at that note, peace.